Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer, and today's review of the Master Grade Aegis Gundam from Gundam SEED comes to you courtesy of those fine folks over at Canadian Gundam. Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all things Gunpla and plamo here in North America. When you're checking their vast catalog and placing your next order, don't forget to use the promo code Gunpla Network to save yourself 10% off. I'm not going to lie, I'm really conflicted about what I want to say here. I like this mobile suit. I like this Master Grade, generally speaking. I think its execution is a little flawed, though. The transformation is the root of the problem, and it affects almost every portion of this kit because of how the transformation works. So, in short, if you're looking, is it a good or a bad? It's a good with an asterisk. If you like SEED, if you like the Aegis, or you're looking for a weird transforming mobile suit, you're going to love this thing. If you don't particularly care for SEED, the Aegis, or transformations, I would say look other places. This is not going to be a kit you're going to enjoy all that much. Now, visually speaking, where do we start? Well, let's go ahead and start with the most distracting things first, because there's a lot of them. Most namely in the torso and the feet. All 4 feet. The torso itself has a lot of empty space. You have some blank spaces down towards the base of the torso, around where the cannon is and those gray parts. And as you move up, there's more empty space behind the thrusters on either side of the cockpit. This is largely because the transformation and how the posability works with those thigh-shoulder joints. They move in their own way. There's not something that kind of blocks them in because of how they're designed, so these vents on the front of the body are just free floating and can look weird and kind of out of place in some poses. Now, there are a lot of poses that kind of hide this and are very forgiving, but it is something to note. This torso, the longer you look at just this torso in a neutral pose, is going to be really confusing and just a whole lot of why. Why did they decide to make it this way? Now, alongside that, those thigh-shoulder joints ruined the just kind of general flow a mobile suit typically has. Now, I will give the Aegis design itself kind of a pass for this. But most of your mobile suits, if you look on your shelves right now while you're listening to this, or just picture a mobile suit in your head, pretty much all of them have a general flow that gets bigger as they go up the torso or gets smaller as they go down. That's kind of just the anatomy of a mobile suit most of the time. That's kind of how figures are drawn. Even IBO, to an extent, has a very similar concept, even being kind of skeletal towards the bottom of the torso. Here, midway up the torso, it doubles in width with no subtle move because of how those rounded parts have to plug in. And it's really weird because when you put it next to the Buster as an example you'll see later, it looks very wide and kind of out of place. It's almost kind of like the weird size disparity between the Dynamis and the Curios for the Master Grade, the 00 Master Grades, but just weirder here. It's not the worst thing, it's not super distracting, but it is there, and the more you look at it front on or just in a neutral pose, the more you're going to notice it. Now the feet are the other part. They are kind of a compromise because they didn't want the feet to be too big to not fit on the back of the forearm, at least kind of blending into it, but they also didn't want the feet to be too small that it wouldn't be stable. And I think they ended up going too close to that because, well, the mobile suit itself is not that stable and the feet look fairly small. Now, a lot of this, visually speaking, is forgiven for the little white blade parts sticking out because those do look really cool, but it does look strange when you look at the whole silhouette of the mobile suit, as those look fitting for the back of the forearm but too small for the feet, but also a little too big for the back of the forearm. I'll show you an example in a minute of a different design for the Dynamis or the Aegis, but yeah, it's just not really rubbing me the right way. And I will say as well, not a particular specific design thing, but the knees, because they're free-floating part at the top of them, there's gapping on either side on both of the knees. Now, it could just be my build, but from what I've seen other people talk about, this is a fairly common thing, so kind of keep that in mind. Now, in terms of comparing it to another Aegis design, here we have the Robot Damashi Aegis. Now, this line was very notably stylized, so kind of take this with a grain of salt. But honestly, I prefer a lot of the design choices made here to make it look like a normal mobile suit versus this weird kind of cobbled together looking thing. The feet on the bottom are much bigger, the feet on the forearms are much smaller. The torso follows a more natural curve for a mobile suit, and it doesn't transform, so it doesn't need any of those extra bits. Just my personal preference, you're more than welcome to kind of disagree with it if you prefer the Master Grade design. Now, in terms of the weapon designs, or the accessories if you will, the beam rifle looks great. It's long, it's big, it's a really cool design. It does have some weight issues. I do really like this beam rifle though. I think it's like a really cool design. I like that it has a sticker camera on the back. That's just kind of a very minor thing, but I just think that's kind of cool. It's kind of nice that maybe like the cameras link up or something. It doesn't make a lot of sense in lore, but whatever. I think it's still really cool looking. And then you have the shield. The shield's nothing special to write home about, but I will note that the inside of the shield is largely white because it's one big white piece with a couple other pieces caked on. Very kind of high-grade-y in that way, so you may want to go through and paint the inside of that if you would like. Now, in terms of posability, it suffers a little bit. As we see here, this is one of the poses from the box. The shield is being thrown back, so you can hold it in its hand. It's a little difficult to get on there, but you can do it, and you can kind of use the little arm blade thing to help rest it, so it's not as hard to pull off. But the beam rifle has already started to sag. It's mostly the wrist joint, and that can be fixed fairly easily, but at the point of filming this, I'd had this built for maybe 3 to 4 days and had it posed for 2. And it's already starting to sag. It did not start this review, this filming session, doing that. So, kind of keep in mind, if you're going to have a very long extended arm pose with that beam rifle, this is probably going to happen very quickly and you may need to fix it. Now, a little bit of super glue or polish or something to add some extra friction in there is going to help, but still something to note. I will also say, a stand is going to be your best friend with this guy. Now, of course, the weird transformation, it doesn't necessarily have a plug or like a special stand adapter for this particular mode. You do kind of have an adapter you can use towards the back, but it's mostly meant for the crab transformation. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You can just use the little 4-plug thing and it works pretty well. Now you can also do kind of a thrusting forward pose here. It's another pose from the box. You can see the beam rifle still a little sagging, but it's not too bad. You can see the shield pop into the forearm, but the little peg is on a little loose, so it does kind of angle down, which isn't all that terrible, but it is that way. A rushing forward pose like this actually is pretty good at hiding most of the weird visual things on the torso because you're really not paying too much attention to it. This isn't the most dynamic pose or action-packed pose, I should say. But it's still a pretty decent pose, and it's one they try to show off on the box. One of my absolute favorite poses for this, though, all 4 of those beam blades going, and man, this is cool looking. This is one of the saving graces of this kit. I love this pose. This is actually partially how I have it on my shelf right now. These 4 beam blades make up for almost everything else on this kit. They are so cool looking. They're so unique. They're yellow, they're sharp, they're pointy. They come off of each appendage. And really, this is like, I would love to have it on my shelf in this pose, but I don't really have the space or the spare stand, so maybe eventually one day I'll do it, but I'll settle for like half of it. This is by far one of the coolest poses I think I've had the pleasure of getting to do on any of the mobile suits in my collection. This is really one of my favorite, as you can tell. I probably won't stop ranting about it throughout this video. Now, the crab mode. I loathe this thing. If we're going from extremes, I went from pure bliss in that cool 4-bladed mobile suit pose to absolute agony in this stupid, awful transformation. If you like transforming things, like if you just like usually transform Transformers, this might be more up your alley, but I cannot stand this. This is something I will never, and I underline, bold, italics, never transform this again. This is one of like the worst looking and worst feeling transformations I've ever done, and it's incredibly frustrating. I don't think I'm too much in the minority on that one. I think generally most people dislike this transformation, but I'm here to tell you, if you were skeptical, you were right, because this is bad. This is not good. I would have honestly, even with it being a master grade, preferred them to just either parts form this or just say no transformation, because let's be honest, no one likes it. Now some comparisons, and we have it here with the Buster, and you kind of see what I mean. The Buster almost looks small by comparison, which is weird because it's not supposed to be. Sure, the Buster follows the kind of SEED frame a little bit more so than the Aegis, but they don't look bad together. Just like, the more you pay attention to the size difference, the more you're like, oh, yeah, the Aegis is weirdly big. It is a commander unit, and I think technically in lore it is a little bigger. But you even think with the big gun that the Buster would feel a little less small, but it does feel quite small by comparison. Here we have it against the Freedom 2.0, and it's kind of shooting pose here, and they look pretty good, honestly. The Aegis is still going to look a little wider, but generally speaking, the Freedom's wings are going to help that quite a bit. So you have some leeway if you decide to pose it with the 2.0. Of course, it's going to be more stylized, but they're both stylized to an extent, so it doesn't look that weird, at least personally speaking. Here you have it against kind of its ultimate successor in the Infinite Justice, and you have that fun kicking beam blade with the actual beam saber kind of being replicated here. And I have to say, these two look really good together in a pose like this, so if I ever decide to get another stand-in just to plug it into this one, this is absolutely what I'm going to do. There is not a lot these beam blades can't get me to forgive, because these look really good, honestly. And they don't actually look all that weird in terms of proportions. I think it is a lot more distracting having those beam blades out, so you're not paying attention to the weird bulkiness of the torso. But generally speaking, when you have it in a dynamic pose like this, it distracts from that quite a bit. And here we have it against all my other Athrun suits, save for the high-grade Infinite Justice. But generally speaking, it fits in pretty well. If you're a big Athrun collector, this is something that is going to fit in fairly well with the rest of your collection. I would just say don't transform it, because I really cannot express how much I dislike this transformation. As cool as those beam blades are on the forearms and the feet, it's real close, which is why I'm real conflicted as to whether or not I really thoroughly enjoyed this kit. I'd say in mobile suit mode, it's fine. Never transform it. If you're a SEED fan, if you're an Athrun fan, if you want a master grade with some weird engineering, this is right up your alley. The build itself actually wasn't that bad. There are a couple bits that I struggled with just a little bit, but they have to be in very specific orientations when you plug them in to actually fit because of the transformation. But generally speaking, I didn't have that much trouble overall. I will say that you have to kind of build the legs 4 times. I guess the arms are kind of the legs, but not really. They're different enough to where it doesn't feel too weird, but you do see some repetition there. In terms of posability, it's fine. Visually speaking, it's fine. But if you don't like transforming kits and you're not particularly a SEED fan, 100% skip this. This is one of those things you can throw in your backlog and just get to when you're super bored and you have nothing else to build, because the transformation affects most parts of this, and while it doesn't make the build miserable, if you try to transform it, you will feel miserable. I've never been a big Transformers guy or a transforming mobile suit guy in terms of the actual application of transforming it. So Personally, it's not my big deal here, but generally, I like it. I don't think it's the best master grade out there. I think it suffers quite a bit from that transformation. But if you're a Seed completionist, or you really like Athrun Zala's suits, or just the Aegis itself, I would say you would be very safe in making this purchase. Anyway, I've been the Spicer here with the Gunpla Network. Leave me those comments down below. I'll do my best to answer any questions. And if you've got similar experiences to me, I'll at least know I'm not alone. But other than that, friends, please do your best to stay safe and keep on building.